Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Evaluating Your Strategic Partnerships for Continued Success. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a Director of Programs at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So check out those links and resources in the chat. We've got a couple of housekeeping items I want to cover before we get started. Firstly, let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. I'm in sunny San Francisco. Secondly, we're going to open up for live Q&A near the end of the event, so please submit those questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We'll try our best to get to them all. Now, none of what we do here at the center could be possible without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, BMO Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for a Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We're humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. Now, before we get started, I'm going to launch a couple of polls just to take a step back and take a temperature gauge on how we are all doing today. So I'm going to launch the first one. How are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic, in survival mode, feeling a little anxious? Let us know. We use this to provide the additional wellness resources we provide for our entrepreneurs in addition to programs like this one. All righty, optimism does look like it's in the lead, which is good. But understand there's a little bit of anxiety. I'm going to share these results so you can see them. Looks like there is a little bit of anxiety, survival mode, and a little fear out there. Hopefully, our presentation today will help alleviate some of those sentiments. And then the second one is what's keeping you up at night? Which of these from the list are you worried about and want to learn more on? We also use this to fuel the next couple of months of programming. So let us know. While I let that run, I'm going to see where we're at. North Carolina, welcome. Hello from Texas. East Bay, all right. Northern Virginia, Houston, Texas, Detroit. All right, we got a good mix. New York, Minneapolis, Jackson. Hello, welcome, welcome. All right, well, thanks for voting on that poll. Looks like marketing, followed by sales and finance are our top. So we'll definitely get to work on putting more programs up for you around those topics. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome in the chat to our special guest today. We've got Michelle Andrew, who's the founder and managing director of Meeesh Unlimited. Michelle, welcome.
Good. Well, good morning to you. It's evening.
Good evening to you.
How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So let's just dive right in.
Perfect.
So what steps would you recommend entrepreneurs take before entering into a strategic partnership to ensure that both parties are aligned in their goals and values?
Well, I think the first step is you really want to define what the partnership actually is. There's a number of different routes you could obviously go down. It's what are you trying to partner for? Is it referrals? Is it reselling? There's any kind of number of ways that you could go through this. Sometimes it's even looking at a partner with an adjacent product. Is this going to help me get more market share? So I think the first step is obviously making sure that you have defined what the partnership is going to be, what you really want them to achieve. And then from there, it's doing all of your due diligence. So looking at, like, is this company aligned with my goals, my vision, the growth that I want to have with my company? Can they scale with me? It's just really taking that sort of deep dive into their business, making sure that you're an expert in what they do, understand what they will get out of the partnership as well as just what I will get as an entrepreneur. And then just making sure you kind of come to the table with all of that information ready.
Love it. And in terms of diligence, how do entrepreneurs assess the compatibility of potential partners?
There's a number of different ways that you can do that. So I actually tend to use, it's going to sound really, really old school. The only thing that I learned in university that I really valued was using business model canvas, which actually Miro has a great template for. So if you go on there, you can look and you can actually look at the different ways that one of the partners that you work with might make some money. Generally, I find if you're looking at how they are perceived in industry, how they talk to their partners, what other partners they use, it's just basically creating a benchmark for what framework you want to work with them, and then comparing it to kind of who else they work with and how they're seen. So using something like business model canvas is definitely something that anyone who's ever worked for me as an account manager will know I've told them to go and do. Becoming an expert in their business is ultimately the best thing that we can do to make sure that we form a really strong relationship moving forward.
I agree. It's a great tool. Can you talk a little bit about what challenges might arise when partnering with organizations from different industries or cultural backgrounds?
Yes. So I mean, I'm here in the UK. I'm originally from Vancouver, from Canada, and I work a lot with US companies. So I do know that even if you speak English, sometimes the jokes don't translate. So I think it's the first thing is just being really, really clear, having open lines of communication, being organized, making sure that you're always following up. It's communication. So even though you think you are all speaking English, sometimes just putting things down on paper and making sure that everyone truly understands is how you're going to stop any of those challenges that can come up and then be quite frustrating. So honestly, being genuinely curious to understand their business, understanding the nuances around the market that they're in. Again, one of the things that I've always prided myself on, and a lot of companies that I've worked with, is the fact that I do really care about the partners and what they get, not just what I'm getting. So I think when you come at things with that genuine, empathy and curiosity and wanting to understand, then you know that they will trust you and you'll be able to develop that relationship and then have a much greater impact if you're working together.
Mm-hmm. And how do you suggest that some of our entrepreneurs bridge these potential gaps in communication to ensure that you get over those challenges of communication barriers?
I mean, just upfront, just deciding on what your cadence is going to be for communicating. So I would treat any partnership very much like any customer I'm selling to. If I'm in a sales role and I've got a book of clients, I'm doing, regular business reviews, I'm doing QBRs, I would treat a partnership the exact same. It's what are the metrics that we want to get to? What is the expectation set on each side? And how have we decided that we want to communicate? So, who's who's going to be the person that things are escalated to if there's an issue. So just being really, really clear up front, having those touch points in the calendar, knowing that you can, reach out to them. I think ultimately, if you're building a good business relationship, you will build that trust and you will have the kind of relationship that you can dip in and out of. So I've got a lot of business contacts / friends that I'm on WhatsApp with all the time, and we're constantly communicating. Even today, I had a client and a partner having a chat, and I was just sort of intermediary, making sure that the messages were getting across. So I think it's just being really on top of those communication channels and open with what the expectation is on both sides.
That's great. So given the somewhat rocky economic conditions that we all live in, what can entrepreneurs do to ensure that roles and responsibilities are defined for the partnership, but also can be adaptable to accommodate ever-changing business landscape and market dynamics, while also still just getting that focus on the core purpose of the partnership in the beginning?
Such an interesting question. Yes. I mean, we don't always know what's going to happen. I think obviously within tech, there's been some very difficult decisions. We've seen a lot of companies doing mass layoffs. That can be really, really challenging. You might have a really great business relationship with someone, like a Google, like a Meta, and your point of contact has just been made redundant. The thing to know is, while there is that instability, there's a lot of companies that, they are just looking to make sure that the partners that they are working with are, again, staying in contact, making sure that everyone's up to date. If you've only got one POC in a company, I would definitely be trying to change that as quickly as possible and make sure that you've sort of mitigated that risk by having multiple people that you could draw on. Again, if you're using business model canvas and you're doing regular QBRs, you're going to have a really good pulse on how that business is. So hopefully, if you are getting any of the red flags that can come up, you're ahead of it. And then also just within a partnership arrangement, making sure that there's some clauses in there that can protect you. If you need to have break clauses in a contract, in case there's some sort of issue with IP or payment, if there's a commercial arrangement and commission isn't being paid on time, or volumes have massively slipped, and so now you're not able to maybe support your product in the way that would best be supported. If you're getting the right volumes through a partner API, having really clear contractual agreements can definitely help with that, and allowing for a bit of that flexibility where if you can say, maybe we can have a bit of a payment holiday this month, but let's revisit this, or if we need to look at if the economics don't make sense right now, is there some adjustment, and remembering that it goes both ways, because it might be your business that's struggling next quarter. So having again, just a lot of empathy and understanding, and just being very, very clear up front will probably save a lot of headache in the future.
Sound advice. How should entrepreneurs go about establishing trust with strategic partners? And when this trust is challenged, what can they do to restore it and learn?
Yeah, trust is an interesting one, because it's that old saying of, you can build trust for years and years, and you can break it in a moment. So follow through, be someone who does what they say. It's like any relationship. I think I do sometimes laugh. I spend a lot of time really nurturing my business relationships. So I actually feel quite personally invested in every business relationship that I've built. And it is because I am leading with that, as I am their trusted advisor. They're trusting me to do a job. And so I follow through. So check in, do the meetings. If you don't need the meeting, explain why we don't need the meeting. It comes down to kind of the basics of just following through. Acknowledge if trust has been broken, what you're going to do to fix it, and just also know that no one's perfect. Sometimes deadlines get missed, but if you can be upfront about it and not not kind of bullshit your way through it, then I think that would be always a wise choice. Just be upfront, fess up if you mess up.
I like that saying. Yeah, and I love that you said follow through. And I always remind people that following up, even if it's a quick note, pays off in the long term.
It really does. It really does. The thank you notes, the team, the team bonding drink, all of it is really helpful.
Yeah. In situations where the entrepreneur and the partner have diverging interests or goals over time, this happens. How can we find a common ground and align those strategies to maintain the collaboration's original goal?
Good question. So I think that with any partnership, like any relationship, it might work off the bat, and in the long run, maybe it doesn't. So kind of going back to what we said before, making sure that you've got a contract in place that makes sense, that can reflect the fact that you might be innovating, that what your business looks like now might not be what it looks like in the future. And also realizing that if it's like that for you, it's probably the same for a partner. I have worked for organizations where the sales model has, completely pivoted from being, perhaps like through a channel to maybe a direct model. And that's going to cause issues for any of the partners that were wanting to sell something through a channel. So those conversations are not easy to have. You just have to have them. You have to be honest, and you come to this table with solutions. So maybe it's how can we help bridge the gap if fundamentally the business model no longer works. So we need to pivot this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to support you with X, Y, and Z. Or actually, why don't we do more of a collaborative marketing partnership together? These things can be changed, they can be shifted, and if there is a way to make it work, always try to make it work. I'm a really big believer in never burning bridges, so I believe that with any partner, any customer, any client, any old employee, any old employer, it's just not worth it. You never know when you're going to run into each other again, and I think the world would be a much nicer place if everyone was kind of polite and courteous and realized that we're all just doing our best. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So in terms of conflict with potential partnerships, what are some ways that we can effectively communicate with our partners to address challenges or concerns that arise? And how do you keep those dialogues open and honest to ultimately get to what you're both trying to get to?
There's no one thing that's going to work. It's going to be really dependent on the partner and the type of communication that you've decided on up front. So, if you're planning on making a big change within your business, be proactive in communicating that. Don't sort of wait to see the knock-on effect on someone else's business. If you've done you've done a website update and maybe something's gone wrong and the tech team in the other company didn't realize that you were going to do this massive upgrade and now the API is broken. So it's just be really proactive. Think about the repercussions of if you are planning on doing something, and also just the great thing about working with partners, whether it's as a tech partner through an API or through reselling through a channel, is you have a network, you have people to bounce ideas off of. So having those touch points, having those meetings in the calendar, as I said, having reasons that you celebrate, having milestones that you recognize together, that will all just help to, again, mitigate any conflicts that might come up. I think I'm going to keep saying the word, I'm making myself cringe, having a lot of empathy for others and just knowing that it's not always going to be perfect, but if you have the right intention and you're kind of acting out of integrity, you will generally get a really good result.
Great. And speaking of milestones, how do entrepreneurs sit down and define those key performance indicators to assess the success of the partnership?
Well, again, so that's going to just depend on the type of partnership that you set up. So if you're looking at a channel partner, for instance, it's going to be something along the lines of, what kind of revenue growth are you getting, like renewal rates, or like the revenue per partner. You want to set all of those up quite clearly so that you can start measuring success. What you're going to measure is how you're going to know the value of the partner in the long term, which is obviously what we're talking about. So understanding what that, maybe 20% of your revenue is coming through partners. Of that 20%, there's probably like 2 or 3 that are bringing most of it, and there's maybe 1 or 2 or 10 or 100 that are bringing the small amount. So understanding who's really driving the revenue and then allocating your resources to those partners. If you're looking at like adjacent partnerships where you're doing a bit more of like referring, then it's going to be introducer agreements. You can quite easily say, okay, well, this is the number of opportunities that have been presented to me. This is, the number of leads. If you're looking at the same audience, can you share marketing spend? There can be metrics around how much you potentially save on collaborating on events or sponsorships, that sort of thing. And then, with a strategic partner, again, it's going to be around that brand awareness. If you're trying to reach a much wider audience, and your tech only does maybe one side of things, but you want your customers to have a really broad range of options, you might be an SAP partner or your Google partner, whatever it is. But you've got a complementary offering and you're going to be working within that ecosystem. So those will have different KPIs around what's coming through. You can very easily track where that traffic's coming from and then put some benchmarks around what good looks like and what the expectation is. Obviously, knowing that if you're going to work with some of the larger providers, you might not have quite as much say up front. That does not mean that you shouldn't be considerate about what you're signing and what you're looking at. But just checking that the contracts do have a bit of flexibility is usually the best place to start. And then with anything that you're integrating with, it's like time to value, cost of acquisition. Those are the really basic KPIs that you can use to measure revenue coming from different partners. And then obviously use that information to decide which partners are the ones to really invest in. I'm also not quite as like traditional in the sense, like I would always focus as much time and energy and budget towards the partners that are bringing in the most revenue. But I am a firm believer in, I follow any partner I'm working on with on LinkedIn. I've got alerts set up. I find out because they might go through a fundraise and then all of a sudden you've got a partner that has a lot of loose cash and needs a bit of help, and now you can collaborate on something a bit more exciting. So I've worked with companies before who haven't necessarily seen that value in the same way, and I always really challenge that, where it's like you just don't know. There might be a small business that right now is not that significant, but soon could actually be a business that is really worth being aligned with, and vice versa. You might have a really big partner that is bringing in a ton of revenue, and then they've done something. They've had a data breach, they've had some sort of issue, and like that's going to reflect really badly on your brand. So if you've overly invested in that one partner, that does pose a bit of a risk. So having the KPIs, again, working those out with your partner upfront and deciding your cadence as you go is is the best way to execute on this.
And how do you maintain the fine balance between your internal KPIs and the external ones that you have with all your various partners?
Yeah, so the problem with KPIs with partners is you are only part of the equation. So you are really relying on them to perform as their business, has stated. You're depending on certain volumes. There's only some forecasting you can do, and that's a very shared. It's very shared. So you need to mitigate against that with your own internal KPIs. So if you've got other ways that you're, creating revenue, or you have, each internal department has their own metrics that they want to hit of how you are with your customer scores, whatever that's going to be. Like, those are just things that are more within your sphere of control. Whereas with partner KPIs, it's always going to be a little bit out of your control, and you have to make your peace with that, or else be really proactive in driving the change that you want to see. Because it might not be as balanced. There will always be partners that will take more than they're giving to you, and vice versa. So just always make sure you're aware of where those risks are.
I love it. In a competitive market with rapid change like the one we're in right now, how could our attendees and entrepreneurs balance the need for short-term results with long-term goals in mind?
Yeah, so touching on what we've said, I think defining the goals up front. This is what we're going to do in the short term. We want to prove out the partnership. You can have a few sort of like lighter touch goals, perhaps just like, let's see if we can get to this volume, and then perhaps if the partnership's going really well, you can start having that conversation around, actually now we want to build an integration, because actually the volume we're getting from you will be a much smoother user journey if we integrate together. So you can have those conversations where it might be just testing out whether the audience is right, the market's right, the proposition is right, the price is right. So I think it's very much just having those conversations. If you've built a relationship, then it should be a fairly easy conversation. Anytime I've met a new partner, I meet them, I try to meet them in person. Hopefully we bond, we become friends for life, we do business together for life, it'll be great. But if I've created that bond with someone, then there'll be a lot more open to having these collaborative conversations where you can be a bit more upfront and say, I'd like to start here, but if this works, I want to bring us here. And that will also just come down to making sure that that's written down, documented. The amount of times I've been berating anyone working for me if they're not documenting what they're doing, I think that's always my biggest fear, is you've got to just write it down or it didn't happen. And then you can hold people to account a lot better as well. But yeah, set those midterm goals, and then look at the long term. Like, what is the best case scenario here? Is it that we have this like amazing collaborative brand? Is it that we've both created X revenue for each other? Is it just reach for do the sort of the moonshot, as it were?
Mm-hmm. And you touched base on a little bit of these by getting to know the partners, and because we're humans doing business with humans, but what are some other strategies to help mitigate the potential risks of the partnership while maximizing the gains on both ends?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one that I touched on earlier is diversification. So don't rely just on one partner. It happens all too often, is you get this massive partner, there's this amazing traffic, and the reliance then becomes just such a huge business risk. So make sure that you're nurturing relationships across different sizes of business, different types of businesses. It's also where a lot more of your innovation will come from if you aren't just so heavily reliant on one company. So definitely diversify those partnerships would be the biggest piece of advice. Also assess scalability. So any company, if you are trying to scale, you need to work with companies that also look like they are trying to scale as well. Otherwise, you might not have a lot of room to grow. And also just companies that generally have interesting markets or like interesting demographics. That's another great benefit of a partnership is you might be able to reach people that you maybe wouldn't have been able to reach with the product that you currently have. So it might be so niche, but you want to be seen in a broader market. So looking at things like that will definitely help. Again, it's great in the UK. You can actually see business financial performance online. I don't know, I can't actually speak to how visible that is in the US. But generally in Canada as well, you can go online, you can see how companies are performing, even if they're a small company. I would definitely be looking at finances. I would be seeing, how companies are perceived, what's written about them. I'd look at Trustpilot reviews. I'd even be looking at employment reviews on Glassdoor just to see, okay, how is this company potentially going to reflect my brand?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, in terms of scale, it's a fine art, I'm sure, of setting milestones that are all aligned for you as an organization, but for you and your partners. So any advice around that?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can incentivize partnerships that way too, right? So if you've got, you want to grow the amount of traffic coming through, so you might have tiered volumes. So that's one thing that I've seen work really, really well in certain, especially in like a fintech or a marketplace. So if you're driving a certain amount of traffic, for this amount we'll pay you this amount will pay you a little bit more, and for this amount it's actually the commission's even higher. So incentivizing behavior that you want, that can be a really good way to test if they do have the capacity and the scale. And also just incentivize good behavior, which everyone, money is a very good motivator for a lot of companies.
Oh, of course.
I don't know if anyone knew that.
How might our entrepreneurs approach the assessment of intangible benefits that may arise from the strategic partnership? Things that aren't just money, like the enhancement of brand rep or access to new networks. How do you assign value to these gains?
That's a really, really good question, and probably one of my more frustrating questions, actually, just because I see that so clearly, and I'm someone who's always banging the drum of the value of working with like-minded companies with, even if it's just like the same vision or mission. You might be in completely different industries, but I tend to see links between businesses that some don't, and I'm often just like, I do laugh, because all businesses have the same problems. All businesses want the same things. Everyone wants to do good, be good. So like, why not find those adjacent industries, figure out how you can make your marketing spend worth like 10x, because you're both using it and you're reaching very different industries and whole other audiences. Like it just, for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. It is unfortunately a lot harder to quantify. So I mean, there's basic things you can do, like surveying your customers or surveying people before or after the partnership happened. Like, do you have more brand awareness? There's things you can do on a sort of more marketing standpoint, but you can also just look at, okay, well, our revenue this year was this and last year was that, and you know what, we've introduced partners in between, and have we grown? So it might not be an actual there might not be a commission model or an API that's driving traffic. It might very well just be some sort of brand association, or the fact that if you are part of the Google network or part of the NASDAQ or part of WeWork, like you've now just had a lot more eyeballs on you, and that's now growing your business. So I think just being really measured in what you've been doing month to month, keeping those activities written down, and then also just not being kind of closed-minded to what interesting partnerships could really do. I think that's always been my like downfall is these. I just think it's so much more interesting when you work with lots of different types of businesses. But if you look at what I do, I work across like multiple different industries because I kind of love them all and can't decide. So
I love it. And yeah, agreed. What you don't measure, you can improve upon. So what role does innovation play maintaining a competitive edge with strategic partners out there?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was touching on in the last question, actually, is like innovation is everything. Like innovate or die. Like I think that's what the tech bros on your side of the world like to say, right? I would tend to say that obviously innovation is what's going to lead to new products, better customer experience, all of that. So if you're working with lots of different types of partners, you're actually probably going to innovate. You're going to see things from different industries. You're going to see things from different types of businesses, and that will just make you better at what you do. So yeah, innovation is critical. It's what you need to be doing. It's what we all need to be doing, and especially right now. So we're in a very difficult situation, and if you can be reducing your marketing spend, your ad spend in some way by, leveraging partnerships, you should absolutely be doing that. It's a really, really good way to get access to a network or customers or, just a different demographic. And it might be able to hedge some of the bets that we're all kind of facing right now in terms of how much it costs to drive business at the moment.
Yeah. And one of the early supporters of the center said, not innovator die, but it's you're trying to disrupt markets, right? By being a disruptor, but he says you have to disrupt yourself or you will die. Because you're like think about Blockbuster, right? They saw Netflix coming up. They didn't disrupt themselves.
Yeah, no, that is a brilliant reference. I'm going to take that one with me. Thank you. But there's no shortage of things that you can do to broaden business relationships, to deepen them, to create new ways of working, to find faster ways of working. Like it's just gonna make both of your businesses better, and it's something I'm actually like quite deeply passionate about. So I'm glad that you have been asking me these questions.
Great. Well, that's all I have for our planned discussion questions, but we have a ton of Q&A, and if you haven't dropped your questions for Michelle in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, do so now. We'll try our best to get to them all. All right, Michelle, I'm gonna do a lightning round because there's a bunch. But we'll get through them. Cool. We get a question here from an anonymous attendee. What format's best to use to approach a company about just a partnership in general? What's the cold outreach? One pager, slide deck, email, LinkedIn, Twitter. Where are you at?
The answer is actually going to be like probably all of the above. Depends on what the company is. Again, start doing your business model canvas. Go on Miro. Get the template, figure out who they talk to, where they go, what they do, become an expert in their business, and then they likely won't ignore you. So I would tend to, I'm like the queen of the LinkedIn stalk. So definitely do the LinkedIn stalking. Send an email. If you don't get a follow up, go on LinkedIn. Send a slide deck, or you know what? Find out what event they're at, and then go find them and say hello and introduce yourself that way.
That's a smart one. So let's say you get this meeting. Any strategies for success when you're pitching these potential partners, especially if you're smaller than the big 100-pound gorilla?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if this is a room full of founders and entrepreneurs, you're going to have a lot of passion. So lead with the passion. I think it's very hard to ignore if you are genuinely coming at something and you know what's in it for them. So it's not really about what's in it for you at that point, especially if they're bigger than you. What is in it for them? And how are you going to make it work? And how are you going to show up? And what does this look like? And do your homework. And that would be how I would prepare.
Love it. So you mentioned QBRs, quarterly business reviews, but yeah, can you talk a little bit about what those are, what goes down in them?
Yeah, it's an interesting subject. So I've got a client that I work with right now, and it's something that I am like very passionate about the team all working through. So especially if you work with a really big account, you might have multiple different business units that are involved in a partnership. So the QBR is an opportunity to bring all of the key decision makers together, talk about what has worked, talk about what's not worked, and that is how you can then start having those conversations around, like, is the budget right? Can we do more? Do we need to do less? Is there an issue? How do we address it? That's how those conversations come up, and that's the best way. And if they're really structured and you've got the right people in the room, it's just like a really, really useful business exercise. And it's also, that's when, if it's not working, that's when you can also flag it, and you can, like in any relationship, decide if it's worth saving or is it time to break up?
Yeah. It's a good time.
Not living up to those KPIs.
Yeah. Don't wait for that annual renewal meeting to come up.
Exactly. No, do them quarterly. It's much less of a shock.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a couple of different questions here around just gauging the playing field with, like, how to understand what the options for partnering with new partners are. So you can talk about like how you understand what their goals are and what you can actually put to the table. Like what are some of the strategies that you do?
Yeah. So any partner, like any partnership could honestly could be anything. So if you're a business that you've got an app and you want to be in a marketplace, fine. So you can look at all the there's different aggregators you could go to. You could think, okay, well, I want my app to be on this employee benefit website. So I'm going to talk to all of the employee benefits providers or the insurance providers. You could look at it that way. So what would it mean for me to have my app icon on this website? Okay, so then you get on there. What's in it for them? Well, you serve a purpose as a dog walking app or whatever it's going to be. People will be able to have this new benefit on their employment benefits platform that allows them to access dog walking. So it's just understanding what's coming to both sides of the table. And then whatever monetary amount you want to assign to that. So it could just be that what your product is so great and they're so happy to have you, and it's a great brand association that's kind of it. You sit there, you click out, and you're into your own environment and great. Or it could be that you actually want to incentivize traffic being brought over. So anytime, and you'd be willing to spend some money on that. So it's understanding how much you were willing to spend to acquire a lead or a customer. So that's then looking at a bit of a deeper partnership, probably needing to have some more commercial contracts drawn up and decide what that value is. And if you are looking at integrating, so then having you want like actually this seamless journey that you're going to be actually embedded within their app, then you're looking at a financial investment to partner. It's not just like, yay, we all win, we get to see each other's brands. It's no, we're gonna invest some dev resource. We're gonna integrate. There's gonna be an API. We need to test it, and now we need to be communicating at a much deeper level, because if there's an issue on either end, that's affecting both of us. So I think it's just really figuring out what it is you want to achieve, doing your due diligence on the company, understanding who do they partner with now? Have they done this before? Like, what is it that I want? And then what is it that will benefit them? And then kind of put together a proposal. So I've worked with partners. I've gone into meetings where I've thought it's going to be a collaboration on an event, or a speaking gig. It might be, let's do a panel. Like, we all want to talk about ESG. So let's get some experts in the room, and none of us compete. Maybe it's about something like that. But you end up with something else. Like, actually, no, we're going to do this event. Let's collaborate on this, or we're doing this thought leadership piece for the FT. If we all chip in, it's a lot cheaper. That sort of thing. It's just be open, put a proposal together. Yeah,
the tide rises together, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of contracts and agreements, somebody's asking about, should we hire a lawyer to draft a partnership agreement, or are there templates that you suggest to
yeah. I mean, again, it depends what you have at stake and what you want to get out of it. So I think if you're looking at like a deep integration and you're dealing with data and like where data lives, that's a really sensitive subject. Definitely probably want to get an IP lawyer involved as well, depending on the complexity of the product. If you're looking at more of a brand partnership, there can just be some, make sure you've got clauses in there for types of behavior. If it's a supplier reseller type of thing, again, it's like if your brand needs to be represented in a certain way, you should have that laid out in the contract, because it could just be that someone's talking about your brand and they're using a very different tone, or really misrepresenting what you're about. That make sure that you've covered for that. There's definitely templates, and there's ways to do it as if you're bootstrapping and you just need something simple, but it's to protect you in the end. So make sure that you've got the things in there that are around hitting certain business objectives, having a break clause, or just, it's not a perpetual thing. Like, have it for 6 months, 12 months, whatever, and review. So, but just cover yourself. I'm always shocked when I walk into businesses and there aren't contracts in place. It's like one of the first things I ask is like, well, what does the contract say for the payment terms? Oh, you don't have it. Okay. Well, that's why they're not paying you. So, yeah.
Let's see. Okay, switching gears a little bit here on referral rates. They're saying, somebody's asking, is there a standard best practice for the percent of referral fees?
Not a standard best practice. It really just depends on the type of product that you have. If you're a very like low priced app or subscription, it's going to be like how much you want to spend for it. What does that lead do? What are the behaviors that need to happen for it to become a, what the customer lifetime value? There's going to be different ways that you're going to commercialize this. If it's a referral fee, 10% of a contract value is a pretty standard introducer agreement. You need to decide if that's for the first year or if that's ongoing. That can be quite expensive if it's ongoing. It's for the first year. It's a lot more reasonable, but a lot less enticing if it's a large enterprise software contract, for example. Mm-hmm. So it really depends on what you're doing. I would try to see what's in it for them and how much you can afford, and also go in with the mindset that you can change things. So you could try something, have a caveat that like, we would just want to experiment on what this does, and have it written down that if it exceeds a certain amount, we maybe can't afford that, or we need to just revisit if the economics make sense. Short answer, sorry. Long answer was that. Short answer is there's probably not a best practice. It really depends on the product, but I try to keep things really simple. So standard percentages, clear cut over a certain period of time, best way to kind of move forward.
Yeah.
Especially for a referral. Yeah.
And in early stage startup land, the word piloting comes up a lot. So any advice on there? I have heard from many people that free pilots tend to burn resources, time, money.
Oh, don't give it away for free. You should. I would try to avoid that, but it depends how early you are. There is also something to be said for you need some bums in seats, as it were. And if you need to get some good logos on your website, I realize that the bargaining power is quite low. So it's put a ring fence around it. So I would say 3 months. Let's do a 3-month pilot. If you like it, great. Then it's X amount. If you don't like it, we're turning you off. So just don't put any flexibility within that. Just be really clear and what the expectations need to be on both sides, and don't let the scope creep. That's always a tricky one if you start giving it away and something's not working. But that being said, I mean, it's difficult when you're starting out. You do want to prove a point. You do need to prove that you can do it. So it's just be really smart about how long you let that happen for, because it's a lot more difficult to like raise prices on someone later on if they've been used to paying a really small amount. And then there's always the issue of there's different ways you can position it. There's always a different way that you can position it, but it's just like a perceived value as well, right? So if you're coming in at a really low rate, then you because you're trying to maybe undercut all of your competition to take all their customers, well, they're not going to be very loyal to you if you then start raising the price to what they were paying before and you've not innovated.
Yep. And one tip and trick for our founders out there, and that Michelle, you probably used before, is showing the partner the amount of value of the discount. So making them sign a contract that says you get this for free, but here's the discount rate, or you get this for a heavy discount, so they can see the 10 grand number. So when the trigger after the 3-month pilot hits, when you send them an invoice for 10 grand, they're not sticker shocked.
Yeah, that's a really, really good. It's a really good one.
Yep.
Or No, I'm with you on that. I was just thinking that's a good one.
Love it. Okay, let's see. What are some red flags to look for when determining if the partnership will work?
Oh, I mean, there's only so much you can do on your side, right? So you do want to feel aligned. You want to have the meetings are happening. The frameworks are being put together. Someone's being responsive, helpful. There's all the good things. I think, if deadlines start to slip, if payments are being missed, if people are not that responsive, if there's, issues around tech and performance and all kinds of things, that's there's not always a lot you can do. And as long as you've been as upfront and open and honest and empathetic and all the things that we've just discussed, then it's just having that really frank conversation of, maybe this isn't working. Do we need more resource? How can I help you? Like, how can we make this work? And if there isn't that reciprocity, then I think there's, businesses change, some grow, some don't. And don't stay with partners that aren't necessarily serving you anymore.
Yeah, basically red flags are not doing anything that you've been giving advice on this whole time.
It's just it's the non-responsive, the communication mix-ups, it's just having a kind of general lack of respect. It's really like any relationship. So I always just I kind of think about that a lot, where I'm like, would I tolerate this sort of behavior in any friendship? Probably not.
Yeah. So I think this is something that a lot of founders struggle with, is understanding who in the organization to reach out to, and what department. So any advice around that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking specifically around partnerships, I mean, there's the obvious sort of partner director, head of partnerships, partner manager, those kinds of things. But depending on the size of the organization, there could be a lot of different people that you want to talk to. You really want to get in on the commercial side. It's going to be someone involved in revenue usually as well. So like getting in with like a CRO. If it's a tech integration, there's going to be operational things that are going to need to be worked out as well. So looking at anyone who's got potentially a T, like a CTO or a CIO, if you've got data. So you do need to just figure out, again, what is it that you're trying to integrate? What is it that you want? And then know that there'll be some buy-in kind of on either side, because you'll have to get potentially tech teams to agree. But yeah, going in at someone who's managing a team of partners, or is honestly, I mean, it's sales. As much as people seem to hate the word sales, partnerships are still sales. It's just the same thing. It's just labeled in a different way, and it's maybe not as direct. So looking at who the head of sales, revenue, all of that, just go in on the commercial side and see. Just always try to make friends with the product people. It makes things a lot easier if you can speak a little bit of product as well.
And there's a question here on, would you approach product partnerships differently than service partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be asking more of a partner if there is an actual, depending on who's paying for the resource to make the partnership work. You do need to potentially approach that quite differently, because if you're interfacing with someone else's tech, then there can also something be, like, again, if it's an API, there's going to be design aspects and journeys to think about, and that's just a lot more. It goes a lot more wrong in a lot more places. So I would definitely, if there's a product element, make sure that you've got a good team behind you to articulate what you need.
And in terms of articulating needs, any advice on like the actual physical pitch in the Zoom meeting or in person? What are some of your tips there?
The actual physical pitch, I mean, I try to do it in person if I can. I know, like, I'm obviously doing so great here on screen with the London skyline behind me, but I always feel like it's much more impactful if you can do it in person. I just think it's a better way to build rapport. That being said, I work with a lot of global companies that are spread all over the place, such as we are, and that's not always possible. So I think again, if you've done your homework, you understand what it is that you want, and you are willing to be flexible, and you are willing to be open-minded, and you come to the meeting with that willingness and that curiosity, it's very difficult for someone to just flat out say no to you. So I think come with some ideas, come with a pitch deck. Everyone loves a good pitch deck, but if you're reading from it, like, it's not going to come across that well. Just get your high level points together. You can, like, with partnerships, ways that I've approached it before, where there are multiple routes, is I've laid out, these are the multiple routes: option 1, option 2, option 3, and put some figures around that as to what this could potentially mean for their business. This means we are paying you X amount of revenue because you're driving traffic for us, and we're going to give you this money. And, like, imagine what you could do with an extra £1 million of commission next year, and paint a picture of what that money could do. And also just, like, celebrate and show that you've done the work to understand what their business is and what their goals are. And again, I'll go back to business model canvas on use the Miro template. It's brilliant and easy.
And folks over at the business model canvas are going to be.
I know. I know. I'm going to have to ask them for a referral bonus. Yeah.
I remember that being a beautiful and expensive book when I was in college.
Yeah, it was.
But now it's available, on Miro and all the other resources you're saying.
Yeah, right? I don't actually work for Miro either. So if anyone's got a referral link, send that my way. I will. Some traffic.
I think you touched base a little bit on this, but I wanted to double click on my buddy here who's asking a question around partnering with if you're not from the US, partnering with the US can be somewhat of a challenge. So any tips, tricks? You're in the UK and you're talking to from all over the US.
Well, I was going to say you need to hire a consultant who's maybe could speak that language a bit better. No, I'm joking. I being from Canada, working in the UK, having worked in the US and worked a lot of US partners. I mean, there is a different work ethic. There's different expectations. Being clear and upfront with what your expectations are, usually the best place to start. When you're going to respond to things, understanding business hours. I'm going through a bit of that right now where I'm helping with a US launch with a client, and it's, unless you've got boots on the ground in the US, this is a really difficult time zone. And, so I put my hand up to say, I'll do the late night call. So it's just, again, making sure that you've established who's responsible for what the rules of engagement are and how you're gonna support that, because ultimately and I know I'm speaking to mostly a US audience, and I'm sure there's a few of my UK friends who've hopped on here just to give me a little bit of moral support, but basically you want to know how you're going to be supported, and if you're not in the same country, that's tricky. So come to the table with how you're going to support one another, knowing that there's a massive time zone. I mean, especially with tech products, there are a lot of overseas teams anyways, so there should just be flows of communication that you can have, whether that's you've got a Slack channel and it's across both companies. It's just making sure that you've defined that up front so that you're not frustrated in the future. The expectation is you won't hear from me between your late afternoon hours because I am asleep. Yes.
Setting expectations. Well, we are almost at time, but Michelle, this comes to the point where you wrap all of this amazing content up into a little package bow. And what's one thing, if somebody was going to dial in to the last 4 minutes of this webinar, what's key takeaways for our audience today?
Okay, so I think I've probably banged on about this one quite a few times, but treat every partner relationship like you would any other business relationship. It is sales. They are representing you. Be respectful. Relationships and business relationships will help retain your revenue, grow your revenue. So look at it with the same love and empathy and support that you would any other business relationship.
Love that. And I got this from you, but follow through and follow up.
Yeah. If you mess up, fess up.
There you go. I like that one too.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise and your experience with our audience today. Everyone is chiming in that they're enjoying themselves and they learned a lot. So I really appreciate you taking the time, joining us from your evening time out there in the UK.
Yeah, it's 7 p.m. It's time to go for a gin, as they say here. Gin and tonic time. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. Really glad that you could join us. And for everyone who are still on, we've got a bunch of upcoming webinars, so check those out in the chat. And everyone have a good afternoon, evening, Michelle. And thank you so much for joining us.